Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Exploring the Lord of the Rings. This is session number 157, our 33rd session on the Council of Elrond, I believe. I don't know what the over-under is on the total number of sessions we're likely to hit at this point on the Council of Elrond, but a fair few. 60? That seems fair. We're only about halfway through the text at this point after 33. So, a full year on the Council of Elrond seems about right. It really does. Anyway, what I wanted to start as I did last time. Okay. Mad Violinist says 11:1. Right. Yeah, that's very plausible. Well, I wanted to remind folks we are in our fall fundraising campaign for Signum University, so I wanted to draw everybody's attention to that. Signum University, of course, relies on the generous gifts of our supporters, and I don't spend a lot of time asking for money, but I, can't forbear to mention it, our need for it, especially now this year as we have officially begun the accreditation review process, and that is a costly process, and so we are still. We still have a bunch of funding on hand from the generous gifts that were given towards our credentialing fund a couple years ago, and that will cover the majority of our. That'll cover the majority of our costs, but not, unfortunately, all of our costs. So we still need to raise a little bit more. And, of course, we have our annual fund, to keep the lights on and stuff and keep everything running. We're about $20,000 or so short of our annual our target. Our target is $75,000 for the year, which will cover our annual, what we need from our annual fund plus our credentialing costs. So like I said, we've raised, about between 50 and 55,000 so far, which is awesome. So grateful to everyone's generosity. So if you haven't had a chance to give yet, certainly encourage you to do that. Go to signumuniversity.org/fund in order to see our whole fundraising page, or you can just go straight to signumuniversity.org/donate to get to our donation form. And the other thing that I wanted to sort of share with folks, sort of in lieu of our normal announcements, like I did last week, one of the things that I'm reflecting on during this time are the ways in which Signum University is positioned in order to respond to the crisis in higher education in America right now. There are a lot of problems that higher education is facing, and as I look around, I can't help but notice that the majority of the problems that higher education is facing, Signum is not facing. Signum already has, either by chance or by strategy, has already eliminated the majority of these problems, and a lot of people don't realize this. A lot of people don't really get who we are and what we've done. Even those of you who attend classes regularly and know about Signum might not know all of the different ways in which Signum is different from the mainstream in these ways. So I've been throughout this fundraising campaign, I'm going to start each of my classes talking for just a little bit about one of the problems. One of these problems, some of them are real crises in higher education. Some of them are sort of just underlying issues that confront higher education, serious problems with higher education today. Some of these problems are obvious to everybody, right? Problems that the whole world is painfully aware of. Things like the student debt crisis, of course, which is what I talked about last week this time. And there are some other problems that the universities themselves are very painfully aware of, such as the challenges with doing remote learning well during which they've all been facing during the pandemic time. Talked about that last week as well. But there are other problems that higher education faces, things that people didn't really think were broken, right? Though some of these have really emerged and have become more clear that there are problems here. And especially the issues of the last 6 months surrounding the pandemic have really helped to emphasize that. And it's one of those things that I want to talk about tonight. I want to talk about enrollment agreements, student enrollment agreements at universities. This is, on the one hand, a fairly simple thing. Most universities, right? You apply to a university, you get accepted. When you are accepted, you are expected to sign an agreement. You're expected to matriculate. You're expected to commit to that school. And that seems like a simple enough kind of thing. Even, sort of an assumption that a lot of people make. Of course, you're going to sign a commitment to the school. You're going to commit to the program. And these commitments usually involve committing to take a minimum number of courses, like to enroll full time or whatever, for the time that you're there. There is usually a financial bond involved. That is, you're signing yourself up for tuition payments, on a yearly basis, whether you're, whatever kind of schedule you're supposed to be paying your tuition on, but you're committing yourself. And if you want to withdraw, if you want to back out, you've got to jump through hoops in order to be able to make that happen. That's the way that these things generally work in higher education these days. And again, this is not something that I think would have jumped out to a lot of people as like a major issue, a major problem in higher education. But I think it is, and I think that that's become clear recently. The issue here, of course, is that this practice, the practice of forcing students to sign enrollment agreements in order to attend your school, clearly subordinates the good of the student to the good of the school. Right. It is in the interest of the school. It is very much against the interest of the students for them to commit themselves in the way that these enrollment agreements ask them to do. Now, some of these agreements have very easy terms. They're not all like super draconian, but some of them are. I mean, some of them are, there are schools that have enrollment agreements that are actually quite sleazy and hard to escape from. But no matter what, whether it's a generous agreement or whether it's a more sharp agreement, it's still not in a student's best interest to enter this kind of binding commitment. It's really just in order to sort of try to secure their own finances that schools do it. Now, the conflict of interest between students and universities, again, the fact that they're, the goods of both do not at all align on this, has become really, really obvious in the context of the COVID pandemic. Right? Of course, this past spring, lots of people saw this happening when students and families, of course, were obligated to follow through on the financial payments that they had agreed to make. They were legally obligated to do that, even though they were no longer getting what they had signed up for, right? And of course, there are very many students who are now suing schools and trying to recoup some of that money. And again, that whole situation wouldn't have emerged. It certainly wouldn't have been in this if students had been, free, had not already been obligated, and those obligations being still called in. This past fall, the current semester right now, there was an even honestly darker situation that often emerged when schools were delaying. There were many universities, and I found this fairly repellent, actually, many universities who deliberately delayed the announcements about what their campus plans were, whether they were going to have students back on campus at all, or whether they were going to be completely remote again for the fall, or some hybrid, compromise. They would delay those reactions until after the date, the deadline for making the enrollment agreements. First, make the students commit themselves for the year, and then make the announcement. And that's, again, not right. But again, the point is, this really, all of this stuff emphasizes the way in which really the whole enrollment agreement situation, this practice of compelling students, having students' attendance premised upon the idea of them signing legally and financially binding agreements to the university, sets students and universities against each other. It puts them in an adversarial relationship, which I think is very detrimental to the whole educational endeavor. At Signum University, we believe that students should be free. We have no enrollment agreements whatsoever. We don't ask any student to make any kind of formal or informal long-term commitment, and certainly never do we collect tuition or demand tuition in advance. When students are accepted to Signum University, what that means is you are then invited to register for classes. You're given the green light. You can sign up for classes if you want to. And of course, we also give you an advisor to help you to, sort that out, to help to work with you to figure out how to do your classes and in what order. That's what acceptance means. You only ever pay for the courses that you sign up for when you sign up for them. So again, we're not, and which means you can determine the pace of your education. And if you want, or if you, in a particular semester, something is happening in your life and you can't take classes, then, well, guess what? Don't take classes then. You should be free to make your own decisions about this. Because we want students to be able to fit their education into their lives according to their own judgment, and not because we've put them over a barrel and made them commit in advance to doing all this stuff. Again, we just think that this is not this should not be a dynamic in education. So as I say, in a lot of ways, this seems like a smaller deal than the student debt issue. But in some ways, it's actually similar, right? Once again, there is this trend, there has been for decades, this trend in higher education of putting the financial bottom line of the university ahead of the good of the student. And I don't think that should be. I don't think that need be. And at Signum, for the last 9 years, we have shown you don't need that. You can, in fact, establish a different relationship with students that is much more generous, much more open, and leaves the university free to now be aligned with the student instead of in competition with them, instead of facing each other, in court now, of course, as so many universities and students are. That's the thing that's the thing I wanted to talk about today. It's my fourth problem with higher education that I'm highlighting here. Now, Evil Dr. Cannon, it is true. It's not universal. Not all universities do this, but many universities do this. And I have to say, Evil Dr. Cannon, it's become more common recently. So it's more common for those of us who are a little bit older to not have had that, but it's not unknown at all. And also, Brandon, I wonder that too. Brandon's response was, partly I think you're lucky, partly I'll bet you signed one as part of your enrollment or class registration process without realizing it. Yeah, I think a lot of people do that. Again, it seems like a normal step, right? Just think of the application process, right? The first step is you're given your acceptance, and then there's a deadline, right? You've got to decide where you're going to go. Well, what does that mean? What does that decision to go somewhere mean? You signed something, didn't you? Right? Like you committed. You told the school, I'm definitely coming. That was an enrollment agreement, and it has legal clauses to it, and it means you can't just walk away. In the middle of the semester, you couldn't just walk away, or like between semesters, you couldn't just be like, yeah, I think I'm just not going to sign up for classes, and maybe I'll do that, put it off a year or something like that. You would have to withdraw from the program, right? Because you'd signed an agreement, right? We don't do that at Signum at all. We don't ever make students commit to us. We invite them to take classes. We'd love them to take classes. We encourage them. We give them an advisor to help them take classes. But they never commit. They never, we never force them to do that. So anyway, and I love it. I love it because it enables us to remain wholly on the side of the students. We're not trying to be in competition. To me, it's one of the fundamental premises of the institution, right? If we can not put into place things which create any kind of an oppositional relationship between Signum and its students or between Signum and its employees, right? If we can be on the side of our students and of our employees, then we can create a better institution, right? That kind of seems like a no-brainer to me. Anyway. Well, Michael, it's challenging. I mean, that's the rationale. The rationale of universities is, you know, an agreement is necessary sometimes to maintain the program. Well, is it? I'm not convinced that it is. I understand. I'm not saying I don't understand why schools do it. But honestly, it's I am not convinced that it is absolutely necessary. Anyway, it's you know, it's and there are some and as I say, it's not that all agreements that are written up are like horrible exploitative agreements, though some are, and some students aren't even aware of that to some extent. But anyway, you know, it's part of a pattern, is my primary argument. It's part of a pattern in how universities do business that I think they need to re-examine. And I think that this whole situation, you know, what's been unfolding over the last 6 months has really brought to the surface some of those things which are really, these problems that have really been latent in the system for quite a while. Anyway, I don't want to take all night talking about it, but I just wanted to raise this again. You know, I'm trying to create some discussion. I want to not be silent about this stuff anymore. I've been keeping this stuff to myself for a really long time, but it's time to be talking about this stuff more. So I really appreciate it. And Kurtzimus, I agree. At the very least, if you do have an arrangement, you should at least have it witnessed 7 times in red ink. That, I think, clearly is the only sensible way to proceed. All right. Well, let us jump back into the text here. This is Radagast's big scene. We got right up to his first line of dialogue, one of his only lines of dialogue. In fact, you know, tonight I think we're going to get all of Radagast's words, which is kind of fun. Little context first. My title for this class was The Order of Wizards, because tonight, you know, this passage is where this really kind of comes to the fore. That is this question of, okay, who are wizards anyway? And what is the Order of Wizards? You will remember that, of course, this came up in The Hobbit, right? But it came up kind of indirectly, or rather, not indirectly, but it came up sort of after the fact, right? It only came up in the context of Gandalf's explanation to Elrond at the very end, right in the last chapter, explaining where he'd been, why he had to leave the dwarves behind and go away. And that was certainly not part of Tolkien's core concept of the Hobbit story when he wrote it. In fact, you know, in the earliest drafts, he was just kind of hanging out with Bjorn. I mean, like, you know, Bilbo was wanting to send back for help. And you know, Gandalf was just kind of like, you know, having crumpets and hanging out with Bjorn. So like he didn't necessarily have a whole lot to do in this. So there was no subplot, essentially. There was no subplot of exactly what Gandalf was up to. Tolkien wanted him to go away, and he wanted him to come back later, right? But he wanted to leave Bilbo and the dwarves. That is, Tolkien wanted to leave Bilbo and the dwarves alone for some time. So it seems fairly clear, based on the manuscript evidence, that it was only later that he came up with an explanation for where Gandalf was, right? What he was spending his time doing, what was the thing that was so important for him to do that he had to leave Bilbo and the dwarves behind right on the edge of Mirkwood. And as I say, it doesn't make it into the story at all until the very end, and there only it's overheard in conversation and summarized by the narrator in one short paragraph, which says that Gandalf met with the White Council of Wizards. So there are a bunch of other wizards that form a council, and they kicked the necromancer out of Mirkwood. It is not clear. The necromancer seems to be a wizard, like, like it's like a sort of an internal matter, right? There's a bunch of other wizards, and there's apparently a bad egg, right? The necromancer, he seems to be a wizard who is up to unscrupulous and inappropriate things. So they gang together and they boot him out, right? Of Mirkwood, I guess. Like, so there's like some kind of disciplinary action or something like that against the necromancer. It's not clear, right, exactly what happens, but there is the vague sense that there are lots of wizards, right? And this, of course, is in keeping with Gandalf's characterization throughout The Hobbit, right? Gandalf is, he's fairly famous in the parts where, he's where I mean, like, he's known around the Shire, right? He's apparently been heard of. It seems to have a reputation among the dwarves. He's known to Elrond, right? So, in the northern world where they're journeying and everything, Gandalf is a familiar face, but he's not unique, right? I mean, he's a wizard, and it seems to be, in The Hobbit, it seems to be a profession, right? I mean, like, you can be a wizard, you can be a plumber. I mean, it's a slight exaggeration, but he seems to be a guy who is sort of a professional wizard, and there's a bunch of them, right? They have a union, Sam, exactly, exactly, yeah, Matt. The Procedure and Ethics Committee of the Wizards Union called a meeting to discuss recent activity of the necromancer. That seems to be pretty much how it seemed to have gone down in The Hobbit, as far as we can tell. Now, obviously, by the time we get to The Lord of the Rings, and certainly by the time we get to this passage, things are in a different place, right? And Gandalf's position is very much elevated in the story. He's still not unique, but he is much more important, right? And yet, there are still these other wizards out there. And of course, for those of you who did the Mythgard Academy discussion of the history of the Lord of the Rings books, the Return of the Shadow and the Treason of Isengard and the War of the Ring, and, plus first bit of Sauron defeated. For those of you guys who did those discussions with me, you will remember that this idea of one of the other wizards who went bad is not an idea that dies. None of Tolkien's ideas die quickly, right, or are abandoned swiftly. So when he decided that the necromancer was actually Sauron, and so therefore clearly not just a wizard who had gone bad, Tolkien took that idea, the idea of the wizard who had gone bad, and put it in his drawer, that drawer that he keeps discarded ideas and characters and passages in, and he took it back out again when he got to The Lord of the Rings. And it seems fairly clear that that's what the Witch King was. The Witch King, who is called the Wizard King throughout the vast majority of the drafting. It was a very last-minute change to change the Wizard King to the Witch King. So the Wizard King was the head of the Nazgul, and he was definitely sort of Gandalf's opposite number. He seemed to be one of the wizards who had gone bad in one way or another. And of course, he was a ring wraith also, so Sauron was obviously involved in this process. But yeah, so the idea of the wizard who had gone bad shifted from Sauron to the Witch King. Now, the Witch King's story in the text is actually kind of made more vague than that in the end. He's not really given a clear story, as like an origin story. That is, we're never told the origin story of the Witch King exactly. Anyway, so the this idea of there being a sort of, I was about to say subculture. That's not quite the right word. Well, the order, right? Like that there's a body of wizards around in the world, right? That remains, right? That's still kind of floating around, and it emerges again at last here. Now, we've had a reference to Saruman before, right? What of Saruman? What are his counsels, right? Galdor was asking that, and Gandalf is explicitly answering that question here in his narrative. But even there, even when Galdor was asking about Saruman and Gandalf was remembering back to the words that Sauron said to the council and everything, he's already changed the idea of the council, right? The White Council now has elves on it. It's not just a wizard council anymore. It's no longer a professional, it's no longer like the National Professional Organization, the Middle-earth Association of Wizards or whatever. I guess that would be meow, wouldn't it? I guess if they're cat lovers, that would work pretty well. But anyway, it's not any longer that, right? The White Council now still exists. He hasn't jettisoned the idea of the White Council, but it now seems to be a gathering of the wise with a capital W, which clearly includes Elrond, and would include Galadriel if she'd been invented yet when he was drafting this passage. And all that kind of thing. I agree, JJ, you're right. Cat lovers are bad guys, and so therefore, it clearly wouldn't be that, right, in Tolkien's world. But I'm joking to cat owners out there. It's just, JJ's right. Tolkien's clearly a dog guy. It's just the way it is, right? That's true. The Middle-earth Order of Wizards would be meow, Green Great Dragon. You're right. That actually works even better. Anyway, so the White Council has been repurposed, right? Has been repurposed to merely a gathering of the wise. Saruman and Gandalf are clearly on it still. So there are wizards present at the Council of the Wise, but it is no longer just, the White Council or the Council of the Wise. It's no longer just a gathering of wizards themselves. When Radagast shows up, right? It changes things now, right? Radagast now getting a third wizard who shows up conveying a message from one wizard to another wizard, right? From one member of the order to another member of the order. Now, once again, raises the concept of what is the, and it's always hard to use this phrase in a Tolkien context, final evolution of the word final is the one that I always have a hard time with in a Tolkien context. What is the final evolution of this concept of the Order of Wizards? With that context, let us look at what poor Radagast, whose big appearance on stage I've been pushing back and back here. Let's see what he has to say. "Gandalf," he cried, "I was seeking you, but I am a stranger in these parts. All I knew was that you might be found in a wild region with the uncouth name of Shire." "Your information was correct," I said, "but do not put it that way if you meet any of the inhabitants. You are near the borders of the Shire now. And what do you want with me? It must be pressing. You were never a traveler, unless driven by great need." "I have an urgent errand," he said. "My news is evil." Now, before we get to his news, let's deal with the first two paragraphs first there. What do we learn? What do we see about Gandalf and Radagast as characters and about their relationship with each other from their first exchange there? Dragon Terracne, I don't know why Shire or Susa, right, as would be the Westron word, why it sounds uncouth to Radagast. I don't know why. I would have to think it's because he's saying the name sounds uncouth, so it's presumably a linguistic comment on Radagast's part, right? That the name of the name of the place just does not sound like the kinds of names that he's used to, right? It sounds strange to him, and so therefore uncouth. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, Emily's wondering if maybe it's because it's a word and not a name at all. That makes it sound weird. One of Tolkien's generic place names, right? Like, the Shire, the water, the so many, like, almost all the names in The Hobbit, right? Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, good. So no, Mike, my sense, the word uncouth is interesting. And the reason I say it's interesting, Mike, Tolkien himself used this word often. Well, often. I don't know about often, but the usage that jumps out in my mind, Tolkien would use the word uncouth when talking about the kind of response that he was expecting from readers of his book to his names. Like, he tried to prevent the names that he gave to people, especially important and prominent people, from looking uncouth to his readers. So I don't think, Mike, that it means unsophisticated specifically. It just means strange and foreign and awkward, right? This is one of the reasons why he changed Galadriel's name, which was originally had a DH in it. Galadriel was the way that he was spelling her name before. He dropped the H, and when he talked about why he dropped the H, and he said it was because the DH vowel combination looks uncouth to English readers. So again, I don't think this is about, like, it's not, I think, a snobbery word that he's using there. He's not saying that, but he is saying it's strange and outlandish, right? Kind of like what Gaffer Gamgee would probably say about the Brandy Bucks, right? Angrist, yes, we do still have Maedhros, right? First of all, it's in the Silmarillion. He never got that in front of English readers. Let's not forget that, right? And secondly, it's not that he never uses that. It's not that he like eliminates that consonantal combination from the languages entirely. It was from Galadriel's character. He did not want that to be. He did not want English readers to be stumbling over the DH consonantal combination in the name of a major character of the book. So yeah, I mean, like, the Galatharim are still there, right? The DH combination is still used in several places around Galadriel, but not in her name. And again, he was there, sort of compromising with, because he was sensitive to this. He was sensitive to. He was not, he did not have the attitude of like, well, I know better than you do. My languages are good and make sense. So if you don't like it, too bad. He was sensitive to this, and so he was thinking about that. But Angrist, like with Maedhros, yeah, doesn't matter. First of all, because it's the Silmarillion, but secondly, again, who knows? Like, had he actually remember, he never got that close, really, to publishing the Silmarillion. The closest he got was right when he was supposed to be writing the Lord of the Rings instead, or when he turned to writing like right before writing the Lord of the Rings was the closest he felt he ever got to publishing the Silmarillion. But in any case, the Silmarillion is a very different kind of thing. Anyway, so yeah. Yes, exactly. Thank you. JJ provided the quote that I was remembering. Before I discovered that many readers like you would be interested in language details, I thought people would feel DH uncouth, and so wrote a D for DH in names. Exactly. That's just the line I was remembering, JJ. Yes, and I love that. Before I discovered that many readers like you would be interested in language details, right? He had kind of not dared to hope that people would actually be interested in his languages for themselves. Anyway, so So uncouth. So as far as the implications, when he says the uncouth name of Shire, it clearly means unfamiliar, right? He's never heard of it, but it's not just like that's a place I've never heard of. It's a weird name, right? And so I do wonder if it's back to wait, I've forgotten who it was who was talking about his names. Yeah, Emily. The rather, because it is a rather hobbitish tendency, right? Just to call things what they are, right? Like in Hobbit fashion, they end up naming the new row, right? At the end. As well as, yes, exactly. The water, the town of Bywater, called that because it's by the water, right? Hobbiton called that because it's a town that hobbits live in. So much of Hobbit landscape is like that. And again, with New Row at the end, we're told that that's like Hobbit fashion, right? That's the way they tend to name things. Well, that's not normal. Like that's not really that's not really common. Exactly, Kurtzimus. Mr. Underhill. Yeah, a lot of their names are sort of similar. Even the botanical names of the Breelanders are of a different kind, right? To call somebody Mr. Fernie or Mr. Appledore or whatever, that's still more abstract than Mr. Underhill, right? Who lives under the hill. Anyway, I wonder if that's what it is that makes it sound uncouth to him exactly. But I think the primary emphasis here is that what a stranger he is, right? Radagast has never heard of the Shire. He's not even, Gandalf gently corrects him, right? First, you were near the borders of the Shire now, right? And it's like, no, you're supposed to use the definite article there, Radagast, right? Radagast doesn't even know how to say it properly. He thinks it's a name when it isn't exactly a name. It's more like a title, right? The Shire is what it's called. So one of the things that I think is most important about his wild region with the uncouth name of Shire comment is exactly how alien this is to Radagast. And this tells us something both about the Shire and about Radagast, right? It's a reminder, first and foremost, that although we as readers could be forgiven for thinking that the Shire is like, the central spot in all of Middle-earth, right? Especially if we start with The Hobbit, not only because that's where, that's sort of the frame of the entire Hobbit, but it's also even the way that Bilbo looks back at his home in the Shire and thinks about and fantasizes about his home in the Shire. There's a Shire words orientation, in a sense, of that entire story, right? And even when it returns home and is changed and everything, there's still the way in which he embraces anew his home in his new context is still a really, really important thing. So anyway, it's as I say, we could be forgiven for thinking that the Shire is like, obviously a really, really famous land, right? But it's not. So we're being reminded of the fact that a lot of people who live in Middle-earth, right, who live in this world, have no idea at all. Know literally nothing. Radagast knows absolutely nothing, right? All he knows is the one word, Shire, right? He knows nothing about it. He has no idea who lives there. He has no idea what kind of country it's like. He doesn't have any more than the vaguest idea of the direction that it is. He's close to it, right? But he doesn't know that he's close to it. Gandalf has to tell him that. And again, he knows nothing about hobbits. He certainly doesn't know anything about the culture of the Shire, or he would never call it a wild region, right? Nobody who's been to the Shire or knows anything about the Shire or its inhabitants would call it a wild region. Exactly. He assumes it's a wild region because it's way out here in the boonies of Eriador, right? And like, what's out here? Nothing is out here. The ruins of old Arnor, and there are a few famous spots, like the Barrow Downs are pretty famous, right? People will still remember stories about the Barrow Downs, probably, back from the times of the Arnorian civil wars and stuff, and they'll probably remember about Weathertop and the fall of Weathertop and everything. But I mean, what's here? There's nothing out here. So what would you expect to find? If there's a country out here, it's got to be some sort of savage, place in which some sort of, I don't know what, crude nomadic people dwell in or something. I don't know. But it's certainly not, he has no idea. Right. Anyway, so Radagast. So this tells us, this is a reminder, right, that folks don't know where the Shire is. But at the same time, this also tells us about Radagast, something which Gandalf himself makes explicit when he says, "You were never a traveler." We might assume all we know is Gandalf, right? And we've heard a couple things about Saruman at this point, but Gandalf is the only wizard we've ever met. And one of the things which is clearly prominent about Gandalf is that he's itinerant, right? He's popping up all over the place and traveling around and organizing adventures and going on cross-country treks, right? He's highly mobile, right? And so we might assume that Radagast is too. Maybe Radagast travels around in a different part of the country, but he probably has his own beat, right? If up here in the north part of Eriador, and points east is Gandalf's beat, then maybe Radagast is somewhere else. And so we're told, no, don't make that assumption, right? He doesn't. Gandalf travels all over the place. Radagast does not. He was never a traveler, right? He has been staying in one place for a very long time. Now remember that Gandalf, when Gandalf introduced Radagast to the council, brought up Radagast in the previous slide, he said that he used to live at Rhosgobel, or lived until recently at Rhosgobel, not because apparently Gandalf assumes that Radagast has moved on. Apparently he's not the moving on type, right? Gandalf's qualification about whether or not Radagast is still living at Rhosgobel, his uncertainty about whether or not Radagast is still living at Rhosgobel, seems to be a testimony to how long it's been since Gandalf has seen him. He can't say he lives at Rhosgobel because, I've not seen him in what? Who knows? More than a century, maybe? I don't know. But yeah. And Karita, that's a really good question. Should we react by assuming that Gandalf or Radagast is the weirdo? Is a really, really good question. Is one of them normal for wizards and the other one weird? Well, Karita, the only data we have, right? We only now have heard, even briefly, of 3 wizards, and they are 2-to-1 sedentary, right? Saruman has a spot, a tower that he lives in that he can be found in. Radagast had a place. Rhosgobel, we don't know anything about it, apart from the fact that it's near the edges of Mirkwood. So we don't know anything about, is it a tower? Who knows? Anything about its architecture or whatever. But both Saruman and Radagast seem to have places in which they are normally to be found. So if somebody's weird, it's Gandalf. But of course, Karita, Gandalf is normal for us, right? That's what we're sort of used to. So I think, Karita, that one of the tentative conclusions we can draw, one of the ways in which I think we're being nudged by by the early exchange here, is to think about that Gandalf is kind of weird on purpose, right? That Gandalf is unusual as a wizard. the other wizards aren't quite like Gandalf. I don't think we're in any danger of thinking Gandalf deviant in a bad way, right? But it is being emphasized that he is, I think, different. Now, Simon, you are right that we do know that Saruman traveled to Minas Tirith to read the scroll in Gondor, right? That he had studied in Minas Tirith long, according to Gandalf's testimony. So Saruman seems to be more of a traveler than Radagast. Anyway, he is not locked in place. But he still has a spot, right? Gandalf has no tower. And there's not been any hint that Gandalf has a home at all yet. And I think that is sort of gently supposed to be weird, right? And yeah, Evil Dr. Ken and I agree. This is going to be emphasized later on when Gandalf's going to be given the name, Grey Pilgrim or Grey Wanderer, which does make it sound like that's a peculiarity of his, right? Which is why he's named that. Now he's not been really given that name yet, but yeah, we will get around to that. Okay. Oh yeah, no, he is called Grey Pilgrim as an endearment. It's definitely a friendly name, even a sort of respectful name, I think. But it's just the point is, people wouldn't say that, right? It's like if being a wanderer was an intrinsic part of being a wizard, you wouldn't name him that, right? Any more than you're going to be like, a plumber comes to your house and you're going to be like, hey, I'm going to nickname you the plumber who fixes pipes, right? Like, you wouldn't do that. That's what it means to be a plumber, right? So again, if wandering were an intrinsic part of being a wizard, you wouldn't give him the name the Grey Wanderer, because that would be assumed in the wizard part. So that's I think the important point there. Okay. Ambrosius Aurelianus, a presentation comparing and contrasting Radagast and Tom Bombadil would be very interesting, I think. Anyway, okay. So that's an interesting thing that I think that we can learn. Notice Radagast's attitude towards Gandalf. I saw some people at the very beginning when I first asked the question were saying, hang on, Dragon Terracne, I don't want to bring up Radagast's other name because he doesn't have it yet. There's no evidence that exists right now. And it's hard. I'd certainly want to separate. It is not fair it is perfectly fair to take the material that Tolkien retcons back into the Lord of the Rings in after years and to think about what is the effect on the earlier material of him imposing this later stuff on it, right? It's all part of the story. I'm not saying that stuff is not legit or, not real or whatever. Totally okay to think about the stuff that gets brought in Unfinished Tales, but I don't want to bring that into this discussion because it doesn't exist. He's not called Iwindil. He's not going to be called Iwindil for many years, right? He's called Radagast, and that's the only name that's given for him here. No, I see you're answering Anger's question, but still, no, this is important because when talking about the wizard stuff, I'm sure, when I was giving my little wizard introduction earlier on, I'm sure many of you were thinking of the essay on the Astari, right? And, some of the things that Tolkien says about the wizards and stuff there. And obviously that's perfectly relevant to this question, right? Has all of the relevance brought in by the fact that Tolkien himself was thinking about, he was trying to answer those questions in that essay, right? So clearly, it's interesting to see the kinds of answers that Tolkien later came to it. But it's not, we have to, I think it's important for us to resist appealing to material that he only wrote later on as an explanation of what he wrote here. Sometimes it can shed light on it after the fact, but usually I think that's not quite the same. Anyway, from you, Smooch, I'm not scolding anybody, but anyway, I just wanted to make sure that, because again, I know that like the essay on the Astari is kind of looming over this discussion in some ways, especially, I don't know about you, but I have been thinking as we prepare to talk about Radagast here, I've been reflecting on the rather hard things that Tolkien said, rather harsh things that Tolkien says about Radagast in the essay on the Astari, but I'm not going there, right? I want to not go there because again, like that's him reflecting on these things after the fact, and I want to see what the text here shows us. Anyway, nobody's in trouble, guys. Anyway, okay, so I saw earlier on people talking about like the tone in which they're addressing each other. They seem very comfortable with each other. Gandalf's tone, when he is not very formal, right? Like he doesn't greet him with any formality, like, hail Radagast as you come, like, he doesn't, we don't see any of that kind of there's no stiffness here. In fact, Gandalf is engaging in hobbitry here, right? His tone is quite playful. Your information was correct, but do not put it that way if you meet any of the inhabitants. He's teasing him, right? Like, there, I can be found in the Shire, so in as much as that was your information was correct, right? But then he kind of teases him, but quite gently. It's not his fault that he's never heard of the Shire before, right? So, he doesn't actually mock him or anything, but he kind of gives him a hard time, right? And points to irony which Radagast himself won't even get, right? Don't put it that way if you meet any of the inhabitants. That's almost like a joke for his listeners, like Gandalf's listeners, like Bilbo and Frodo's benefit, right? Because Radagast certainly would not understand why that sentence was funny, because he doesn't know anything at all about the inhabitants, which was the point. Yeah, JJ, I agree. Sometimes you tell a joke for yourself, not for your audience. That certainly does happen. So Mike says, old friends who haven't spent much time together lately, but spent a great deal of time together in the past, like maybe on a long boat ride. Yeah. They've been out of touch for a long time. I saw somebody earlier on say, they sound like two people who have known each other before, have been out of touch for a long time, and are kind of okay with that, right? Don't, are comfortable with both seeing each other again and also with having been out of touch all along. So, you were never a traveler unless driven by great need. After teasing him a little bit and making a joke, which I agree is primarily for his own benefit, he tells him you're near the borders of the Shire now, also gently correcting, his diction, explaining it's not a name, it's you have to use the definite article in front of it, right? And what do you want with me? He does get right down to business, right? Which is polite because, as he says, like, it must be pressing. Like, I know this has to be important because you were never a traveler. So only great need would have brought you seeking me, so let me not waste your time. Tell me what do you want with me now. Coming back to the question El Guapo that you were just pointing out, Gandalf could have asked, who told you that? Where did you hear that I could be found in the Shire, right? That itself, he doesn't ask that, right? But I've got to think that Gandalf is thinking that. First of all, I think that Gandalf has to already be suspecting that Saruman sent him. There's a limited array of options as to why Radagast could be here, seeking Gandalf, and in a wild region with the uncouth name of Shire. There's a limited number of reasons that Radagast could be here. He could be coming to tell him about something that was just transpiring in Mirkwood, right? If there's been Mirkwood was just sacked by orcs or something. I mean, like, I get some kind of calamity on the other side of the mountains that Gandalf might not have heard about yet, but that that Gandalf would need to be informed of or something. That's the only reason I can think of for Radagast coming on his own. Because again, he does apparently, based on Gandalf's reaction, it's not a thing that Radagast does, right? So some great need must have sent him. So if it's not a great need of his own that he's come to seek Gandalf, which would make some sense, because Radagast is also, if he doesn't quite share the same beat that Gandalf does, he's at least adjacent, right? I mean, he's in southern Mirkwood, and that's not so far off of Gandalf's beaten path. Yeah. So, if Radagast needs help, who's he going to go to for help, right? Well, actually, there's several candidates there, right? Mightn't he go to Galadriel? Mightn't he go to Thranduil? What is it that would lead him to go seeking for Gandalf's help in particular? That would certainly, I would think, be puzzling, right? Puzzling to Gandalf and make him really wonder what Radagast is up to. Let's go on and look at his words. I have an urgent errand, he said. My news is evil. Then he looked about him as if the hedges might have ears. Nazgul, he whispered. The Nine are abroad again. They have crossed the river secretly and are moving westward. They have taken the guise of riders in black. I knew then what I had dreaded without knowing it. The enemy must have some great need or purpose, said Radagast, but what it is that makes him look to these distant and desolate parts, I cannot guess. What do you mean? Said I. I have been told that wherever they go, the riders ask for news of a land called Shire. The Shire, I said, but my heart sank. For even the wise might fear to withstand the Nine when they are gathered together under their fell chieftain. A great king and sorcerer he was of old, and now he wields a deadly fear. Who told you, and who sent you? I asked. Saruman the White, answered Radagast, and he told me to say that if you feel the need, he will help, but you must seek his aid at once, or it will be too late. Kurtzimus, that is a wonderful question. I wonder what other guises the Nazgul take. Yes, they have crossed the river secretly. They have taken the guise of riders in black. Have they been seen in other guises? I mean, it stands to reason, right? Since we're told that they don't really have shape. Yeah, they could walk unclad. That they are choosing to show themselves openly is, I think, one of the interesting things here, right? Uh, riders in red, riders in yellow. Yeah, I suppose. Uh, Matt says he can't see the Witch King saying we are but poor lost circus performers. Right. No. I think the point is that they're riding openly, right? They have taken the form of the guise of riders in black. That is, they've put on the cloaks to give shape to their nothingness, right? They've put on the cloaks and the boots, and they're riding their horses in order to enable themselves to interact with other people, right? If they didn't have to interact with other people, they wouldn't necessarily need the gear, the cloaks and such. But they are using the cloaks and such. Yes, Kurtzimus, they would certainly list the cloaks as among their assets. No question. No question. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that seems not a given. Again, are there other guises that they might have appeared in? Could they appear in other shapes entirely? I have no reason to think so, necessarily, but I suppose. I mean, so like, first of all, the Dark Captain, you know, the Captain of Fear at the head of the armies driving the armies of Gondor back from Osgiliath, that's a different guise, right? You know, to be this, both the general and the, you know, this black force of fear in the army. He's not totally different, right? But again, it's certainly riding forth as the general of the army is a different guise than. They're not quite poor lost circus performers, Matt, but they're closer to it than when you ride out of Minas Morgul at the head of your army. Yes. Good. Oh, you guys are already up to Saruman's message. Hang on, we'll get there. I have an urgent errand, he says, right? So he immediately says, I'm not here on my own behalf, right? The first thing he communicates to him is, I was sent. I'm running an errand, but it's an urgent errand, just as Gandalf has said, unless driven by great need. And Radagast endorses that. Yep, great need. You're exactly right, Gandalf, right? I'm on an errand, right? I have an urgent errand. He's bringing news, and the news that he's bringing is evil, and the news is that the Nine are abroad again. They have crossed the river secretly and are moving westward. The Nine are abroad again. The Nine have not been abroad for a long, long time. What does this mean? What does this tell us? That the Nine are abroad. What are they up to? Where are they going? He has not said anything about that. The mere fact that the Nine... You might think that he would sort of lead with the Nine are abroad and they're looking for, like, you. They're looking for the country where you've been hanging out, right? He doesn't go there immediately. The mere fact that the Nine are abroad... Like, the word Nazgul is his news. Right? My news is evil. Nazgul. Right? The mere presence of the Nazgul, the mere presence of the Nine out in the world, having crossed the river and now coming into the rest of the world, that is definitely that is his urgent news, in a sense, right? Without even considering what it is exactly that they're up to. And yeah, I agree, Fourth Dauntless. The Nine are abroad again is chillingly ambiguous. Even not knowing who these guys are, a first-time reader should feel the menace. Yeah, his whispering. I love Fourth Dauntless in that way. The choice of the word Nazgul, right? Nazgul as Tolkien knew very well, is a very ominous and evil sounding word. You don't have to know anything to know that something called Nazgul is probably bad news, right? And if somebody is saying my news is evil, and then he's looking around in a paranoid way and then whispering Nazgul, oh man, that cannot be good, right? And then the 9 are abroad again. 9 who? 9 what? Yeah, Kurtzimus, exactly. Kurtzimus says it's like Aslan is on the move, except in a bad way. Yes. Yes, very good. Exactly. Gandalf's response, I knew then what I had dreaded without knowing it. Remember, there was some fear on the people that he met, right? He met some refugees and there was some fear on them that they would not speak of, and he didn't know what it was. Did they meet the Nazgul? I don't know if they would have to have met the Nazgul. All they would have had to do was hear stories that they were around, to have talked to other people who might have seen them or something, or even just heard rumors. Like, there are rumors that there are these 9 incredibly creepy riders, you know, or even just like shadows that have been seen, and the kind of terror that they would inspire in anyone who saw them even from a distance, or even was near where they were, or maybe even had been, right? I mean, there are lots of ways in which the presence of the Nazgul in the region would communicate itself and spread fear among the people, and Gandalf seems to be picking up on that, right? So he says, I knew it, right? My heart dreaded something. I could tell that something was wrong. Remember, he's referring to the premonition that led him to leave the Shire in the first place, right? He felt like something was amiss, and so he came down. He had some kind of presentiment that something was up, and now he realizes what it was. Then Radagast comments, right? He sort of editorializes. The enemy must have some great need or purpose, but what it is that makes him look to these distant and desolate parts, I cannot guess. He has no idea. On the one hand, it is obvious that Sauron is up to something. He has sent the 9 together on a mission, right? And he has sent them out to the back of beyond. These distant and desolate parts, that's what Eriador in general is to everybody else who doesn't live there, right? Distant and desolate parts. Nobody, who lives here? Nobody lives here, right? You've got dwarves and you've got Círdan, who are all out, you know, closer to the coast. You got dwarves in the Blue Mountains, and you've got Círdan and the elves out there at the Havens. You've got Rivendell, right? You've got a dwarf road. You've got Bree, but come on, Bree is a pretty backward little human village at an old ancient crossroads, you know, which doesn't even really exist anymore because one of the roads isn't even. I mean, it's a road from nowhere to nowhere now, essentially. It's not. I don't think that once if he were to go and stay in the Prancing Pony, I don't think that Radagast would change his opinion about these parts being desolate, right? Okay, so there's a village. Okay, well, still pretty desolate as far as I'm concerned, right? So again, you've got the Havens, you've got the dwarves, you've got Rivendell, and what? What else? In all of Eriador, what else is there? Nothing. There's some people who live in Dunland, right? But apart from that, what else is there? Nothing, right? There's the Dunedain, but they don't, you know, they're not a big thing, right? They're certainly not civilization. So, the enemy must have some he would not just send all 9 of the Nazgul together off into this area for no reason at all, right? And yet, he freely admits he cannot guess at all what possible purpose he could have. Gandalf, of course, is immediately alarmed. "What do you mean?" said I. "Like, what do you mean that he is looking to these distant and desolate parts?" Remember that Gandalf was worried about spies from the beginning. I mean, from the beginning of the book, right? From chapter 2, he was worried about spies. It's why he infenestrated Sam in the first place, right? Because there seemed to be some kind of genuine concern that there might be a spy. And as he admitted later on, just in this chapter, spies had been seen around the Shire. So that seems to be a realistic concern on Gandalf's part. So Gandalf has been concerned about that all along. And now he says, "Radagast, I have been told that wherever they go, the riders ask for news of a land called Shire." The lack of the definite article. You see whose fault that is? You see whose fault it is, right? Why is it that Radagast misstates the name of the Shire? Exactly. It's Gollum's fault. It's Gollum's fault, ultimately. Yeah. Because everything Sauron, literally everything Sauron knows about the Shire and the current location of the ring, he learned from Gollum. And so they are saying what they're saying all that they know, the word Shire, right? So Radagast is only reporting what the riders are reported to be saying. "I have been told that wherever they go, the riders ask for news of a land called Shire." Who told him that? Now, it might sound, at first, like Gandalf was talking to refugees on whom lay a fear of which they would not speak. Maybe Radagast has also spoken to refugees and heard rumors, right? He'd heard from people who had run into the Nazgul and been asked, or talked to somebody else who told them about these incredibly creepy guys in black cloaks who asked about a land called Shire. So, but I don't think so, right? Gandalf corrects him again, right? "The Shire," I said, but my heart sank. His correction is meant to be sort of lighthearted, right? To establish a fairly lighthearted, to maintain a kind of lighthearted tone, despite the fact that he's still speaking fairly lightly and lightly correcting Radagast's diction here. He said, but my heart sank, right? Despite the fact that my words were still fairly light, my heart sank. He knows what this means. This means Sauron already knows. Remember that Gandalf has already concluded, because he knows that Gollum was captured by Sauron, and he has interrogated Gollum, and so he believes that he knows what Gollum knows and trusts that Gollum told Sauron everything, right? So therefore Gandalf knows what Sauron knows. So this is not that the Nazgul are searching for the Shire is not news to Gandalf. He told Frodo that was going to be happening, right? Not that it was going to necessarily be the Nazgul, but that Sauron's spies would be searching for the Shire. And that Sauron himself would think that the long unnoticed name of Baggins had become important. Remember, that stuff is all there in chapter 2. The reason his heart is sinking is that the Nazgul are a lot closer than he was afraid that they were. Yes, Fourth Dauntless, I agree. I also read this as his correction being sort of reflexive as his mind is racing ahead. Yes. Yeah. The timing, look, I don't want to get into this too much, but there's no question that the Nazgul will have had to book it from the bridges of Anduin to get up here by this time. And remember, we were talking about this before. There is every reason to believe that the Nazgul could take months, right? Like a year, maybe, searching around for the Shire even. I mean, it's pretty hard to find. Nobody knows about it. Nobody talks about it. And it's way the heck out in these distant and desolate parts of Eriador that nobody even goes to anyway. And there's no hint from anything. Like, there's nothing from like that it's on the other side of the mountains. Gollum would know from Bilbo, right? And from what he heard in Dale. But yes, there's no reason to think that Sauron. So from Gandalf's perspective, when Gandalf has that conversation with Frodo, he does not pack Frodo up right away, right? You know, his message to Frodo in chapter 2 in the Shadows of the Past is not, Sauron knows about you, he's hunting for you, and they could be here any minute. Let's get out. That's not his message, right? He doesn't think there's any hurry. And he's perfectly willing to let Frodo delay months. And his rationale there seems to me totally appropriate, right? If Bilbo's vanishment, right? Bilbo's very sudden and remarkable departure from the Shire was more than a 9 days or a 99 days wonder, right? There were stories told far and wide, right? Remember, in Bree, they know the story well about Bilbo's farewell party and his vanishing, right? His sudden departure. That's an old hat story in Bree. That story is going to circulate. And so therefore, the more widely the story circulates, especially involving the name Baggins, right? That's going to lay a really big trail. So Gandalf is right to say it's best, it would be worth a little delay, as he says to Frodo, if you could leave without its becoming generally known. Okay, so the Nazgul are coming. The Nazgul are on their way, and based on what Radagast seems to be telling him here, right, they are much closer than Gandalf was afraid of, right? Now, this doesn't mean they're right behind Radagast, right? This doesn't mean that they're right on the doorstep. Flammifer, as you say, they're not going to get to the Shire for 3 months yet. Now, that's still pretty good time, given their lack of information. That's still pretty good time. They could be, goodness, they could have wandered off down in, the Enidwife and Dunland and up, there's a lot of ground in Eriador, and if all you have to go on is to look for a land called Shire and a person named Baggins, it is not much to go on, and it's going to take you a long, long time to be able to find that. It would be kind of like me setting out on foot, being told the name of a town in, I don't know what, the Yukon or something like that, and setting out on horseback to try to find it, knowing nothing other than that, it's somewhere to the north of me, right? But anyway, so Gandalf was originally in no hurry. He's going to be in more of a hurry now, but again, Radagast, is not saying they're right behind us. His news is not that Sauron is hunting for Baggins and Shire. Gandalf knew that was going to be happening. The news is Nazgul, the Nine, are abroad again. He sent the Ringwraiths, all of them, to hunt for the Shire. And that is a little bit more alarming than just the concern about spies that may or may not be lurking outside the windows of Bag End, perhaps. Now, what do we get when we get his heart sinking? More on this. For even the wise might fear to withstand the Nine when they are gathered together under their fell chieftain. A great king and sorcerer he was of old, and now he wields a deadly fear. So we're setting up the Witch King in particular. He's a big deal. And when all of the Nine are gathered together with their chieftain among them, this is a problem. Now the problem is not just discovery. It's not just trying to keep... It's not just to keep spies from finding out where Frodo is and reporting back. How can he be protected? Right? How can they stop the Nazgul? This is... Kurtzimus is asking, why is it only now he wields a deadly fear? Kurtzimus, I have to imagine when it says a great king and sorcerer he was of old, that means prior to his wraithification. He was always a sorcerer. He was powerful, he had political power, and he had sorceress power before he got wraithified. And now he wields a deadly fear. As a wraith, he wields a deadly fear. There's your backstory. Right? That's the Witch King's backstory right there. A great king and sorcerer he was of old. That's pretty much what we know. But now he wields a deadly fear. Who told you and who sent you? I asked. Saruman the White. Now, yeah, Kurtzimus says, wasn't he wraithed during the Northern Wars? Oh yeah. No, like when he was ruling Angmar, yeah, he was totally post-wraith at that point. Yeah, exactly. But that's not what Gandalf is talking about. I don't think it is. I think he's talking about he's setting up who the Witch King is. He's not referring to Angmar here. I don't think he's referring to Angmar. I think he's talking about the independent power that the Fell Chieftain the Fell Chieftain was a big deal off his own bat, right? Without Sauron's help, their Fell Chieftain was a big deal. Since he's gotten Sauron's help, he is now a very serious deal. Witness the Angmar situation, right? So that's what so again, he says of old. Now, of old could easily refer to the time of Arnor, and the time of the civil wars and the downfall of Fornost and all that kind of thing. So it is possible that is to say that phrase could easily refer back to that time. But I don't think that he now wields more deadly, like the fear that he wields now is more deadly than the fear that he wielded when he was the Witch King of Angmar. I don't think there's any reason to think there's much of a difference, really, between the Fell Chieftain then and now. Maybe there is, and I'm not thinking of it. Of course, Sauron is back and has declared himself. That was different. That was not so. But again, Sauron had already begun to take shape again by the time Arnor was taken down by the Witch King. So, Yeah, exactly. Brandon, that's excellent. Sam was asking about why does he have to brief Radagast on the Witch King? Yeah, he's not. That's not in the... All he said to Radagast was, the Shire, who told you and who sent you, right? He's explaining his thoughts and his feelings. Why is it that his heart is sinking? His heart is sinking because he's afraid of the Witch King. And especially the Witch King with the rest, with the other 8 along with him, right? All 9 of them gathered together under the Witch King. Gandalf is like, I can't protect Frodo from that, right? There's nothing I can do. Even the wise might fear to withstand the 9 when they are gathered together under their fell chieftain. So the first question was, that is back in chapter 2, back in the Shadows of the Past, Sauron knows about the Shire, and he knows about Shire, and he knows about Baggins. How worried should we be? Answer, not that worried, right? I mean, it's a cause of concern, but it's going to take him a long time to get here, and, as long as we're careful about spies and not letting the story spread abroad, we might be okay, right? So he doesn't worry that they're going to be discovered very soon, and he doesn't worry, and he seems to believe, they're proceeding in an orderly fashion, right? Let's get Frodo out of the Shire, and he'll move to Buckland, and then from there he'll take off on his journey and go to Rivendell. But he can protect him, surely. Gandalf can protect. If he sticks with Frodo will have a chance, right? But now, wait a second. You're telling me all 9 Ringwraiths under their fell captain, who's a big deal, right? The Witch King of Angmar himself, plus all 8 of the rest of the Nazgul, are all coming on this trip? I can't protect Frodo from that. What are we supposed to do? Who told you and who sent you? Now he has to have a suspicion, and Radagast confirms it. Saruman the White, and he told me to say that if you feel the need, he will help, but you must seek his aid at once, or it will be too late. This is an exceptionally cunning message by Saruman. It is extremely, as several of you are pointing out, it is extremely manipulative, right? The things that I would emphasize there, which I saw struck several of you as well. Notice how this seems almost designed to respond directly to Gandalf's anxiety, right? He was already anxious that Frodo might be discovered by spies. But now he's thinking, what if the Nazgul find him? And again, I can't protect him from all 9 on my own. And so the message is, Saruman will help. Saruman will help. He has just been wrestling with the fact that he needs help. He can't do it on his own. Saruman will help. Okay, that sounds hopeful. That sounds handy, right? But notice the other things there. If you feel the need, he will help, right? Unless, that is, Gandalf, you think you're above help. Unless you think you can just take all 9 of the Ringwraiths on your own, right? Unless you're too arrogant to admit that you need help. Unless that's true, Saruman will help. That if you feel the need is so effectively manipulative. I only call it manipulative in retrospect, really, because we know what's going to happen, right, when Gandalf gives into it. it doesn't have to come off like that. But knowing what we know, you can see that. Right, Sam, I agree. Sam says, how much of this implication is Radagast aware of? None. If you feel the need, he will help. That doesn't have to sound pointed, doesn't have to sound snide. If you feel the need, he will help. It doesn't have to sound like that, right? If you feel the need, he will help. If you think you need his help, he will help. Now notice, remember, Radagast has no idea what Gandalf is doing. What would Gandalf need help with? Radagast hasn't the faintest idea what makes the enemy look to these distant and desolate parts. He cannot guess what Sauron is looking for and why he's coming here to the back end of Eriador, right? And not knowing that, he also has no idea, having not seen Gandalf and knowing nothing about this uncouth place called Shire, he has no idea what Gandalf is up to, right? Do you live there, Gandalf? Is this where did you make a little tower there or something? I don't know. How's he going to know, right? Is there something you're working on for some reason? Does that have anything to do with what Sauron is doing? Maybe it does, but there's no necessary reason to assume that, right? And so Saruman, to him, he could easily say, he could definitely say that it's just very kindly meant, right? If you feel the need, like, I don't know if you need help or not. Maybe you don't need help. I mean, maybe Gandalf was just like, on some kind of wizard's retreat or something out here. And so all that Gandalf needs to know, Gandalf needs to know that the Nazgul, right, you don't want to bump into them in a back alley, right? But maybe he just needs to flee. Radagast has no idea. He has no idea what the Nazgul are doing. He has no idea what Gandalf is doing. He's just supposed to tell him, by the way, the Nazgul are around. They're looking for Shire. If you need help, Saruman says he can help. And Simon, I agree. If you feel the need, feels a little bit like a test to see if Gandalf is involved and where his allegiances lie. If you feel the need, he will help. And I love that he will help. Not, he's willing to help, or, he might help, or, anything. Just, he will help. Like, the help is there for the asking, right? All you've got to do, Gandalf, is just speak the word, and Saruman is there for you in your corner. And that sounds really good, right? Really good. Now, Nancy, you're right. The number of things that are so important that Sauron would send all 9 has got to be a small number of things. But what could it be? Remember, the ring is off the table. It's out of Middle Earth anyway, right? That's a fact. Everybody knows that, right? Everyone knows that. That is a thing that is true. And so therefore, he's puzzled. That's why he's puzzled. He can probably think of many ends that Sauron would have in mind that he might want to accomplish. But what on earth could it be? Because, there would have to be a tiny number of things that would lead Sauron to send all of his ringwraiths out. But what? What could possibly be that important to Sauron? Again, it's not on the table, right? The Ring of Power is gone. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. So there's a very good reason for them not to think of that as a potential reason. Him seeking one of the elven rings, Rowan, sure, that's much more likely. Those at least are still around, right? And people don't know where they are, so any number of things could have happened. I mean, if it's going to be Ring of Power related, that's a better theory. certainly, than theorizing for some against all known facts that, you know, the One Ring is still around. Like Leobot says, could the Nine be seeking the heir of Elendil? Well, yeah. Now, that depends, you know, does Radagast know about that? I don't know that Radagast knows about the existence of the heir of Elendil. The heir of Elendil is a pretty well-kept secret, too. But sure, there are some who might possibly be thinking that. It's possible. But you must seek his aid at once, or it will be too late. Now, again, thinking from Saruman's point of view, that is... from Saruman's point of view, that's also clearly manipulative, right? Come at once or it will be too late. You can't just come wandering down here on your own time, right? I'm going to put some urgency in it so that he knows, you know, to try to get him to come right away. But does it make sense? Yeah, it makes sense. And I agree, Kurtzimus. It definitely does sound like a message from a superior, though a kindly superior. If you feel the need, he will help. He's going to come and help bail you out, right? He's here for you. Like, your supervisor is here to support you in your work, whatever it is your work is, right? Your supervisor is here to support you. But you're right, Brandon. It does have the air of a superior. Brandon says, "None of this 'expect me when you see me' nonsense. You arrive when I tell you to." Yes, exactly. I agreed, Mike. It's only in hindsight that this sounds creepy or manipulative. It does not sound creepy or manipulative at all. That's why it's so effectively manipulative, right? There's all kinds of positive reasons why he would say, "Seek his aid at once, or it will be too late." Right? Brainstorm with me. What are some reasons why it would make sense to Gandalf to think he should hightail it down to Orthanc? Maybe it has to do with geography, right? Maybe they haven't gone through the Gap of Rohan yet. And if Gandalf and Saruman join forces down at Orthanc, they can prevent the Nazgul from coming through the Gap of Rohan, and therefore, at the very least, buy themselves a lot of time, right? That's one possibility I can think of, but come soon, or it'll be too late. Like, once they're through the Gap of Rohan, he can't, Saruman doesn't have the power to prevent them himself, right? But maybe there's something that the two of them can do together that would enable them to, close the Gap of Rohan to the Ringwraiths. That certainly seems one plausible explanation. Another one, or it will be too late, like Gandalf is concerned. He was concerned about spies before. He is much more concerned now to know that it's the Ringwraiths themselves that are hunting for the Shire. They might find it, right? I mean, he wasn't worried about timing before. But if there is help that Saruman can give, remember, this is premised, this hits Gandalf right when he is just reflecting, I can't protect Frodo myself, right? If he hasn't formed the phrase, I need help, in his mind yet, he's, explicitly, he's still definitely thinking in that direction, right? I can't stand up to the Witch King and all of the Nazgul by myself. And now here's Saruman offering to help. Maybe there's something. Who knows? Who knows what Saruman has found? Remember, this is Saruman's area of research as well, right? Saruman has been studying the Rings of Power. The Rings of Power, like the source of the deadly fear wielded by the Nazgul, right? You know, wouldn't it be nice if you were only dealing with a great king and sorcerer and not the one you wield? Maybe there's some kind of maybe he's figured out something about the Nine Rings and can kind of counteract them in some ways. Who knows? I'm sure that was exactly the kind of research that Saruman was doing. I'm sure that's what all the council thought that he was doing. I'm sure that it was very genuinely what he started off by doing, right? So it's perfectly plausible that there could be some, protection, weapon, technique, some way. There's been a secret that Saruman has discovered that will enable him, Gandalf, to resist the Nine, perhaps. Yeah, as Mike says, Gandalf's plan might extend no further than to get the expert involved and defer to his guidance. Yeah, I mean, again, this is what Saruman does. He's the world expert in the Rings of Power, and that's what you need when the Nazgul are abroad. What other weapon is there, right? What else can you do against the Nazgul? And here's Saruman saying, there's a way out of this, right? I can help. But you have to come at once, or it'll be too late. And again, there's plenty of reasons to there's lots of reasons for haste now, right? This is why it's always been one of my least favorite moments in the Peter Jackson films when Gandalf believes that the Nazgul might be literally days away from finding Frodo in the Shire, and he's like, okay, they're right on your tail and could be here any minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way. I'm going to leave you behind, and I'm going to go to Isengard to seek help from Saruman, even though I have no reason to think that he has any help to offer. It's just as likely that I'll get down there and he'll say, man, I don't know, I got nothing for you, Gandalf, right? But I'm going to take, just on the offhand chance that there might be something he can do to help, I'm going to do that. And that's totally worth leaving you utterly unprotected, wandering on your own with the Nazgul, like right here at hand. That whole situation in the film just made me laugh out loud when I first saw it. I'm like, that makes no sense at all. But this makes much more sense. And this is a really, really good message. Very well crafted message. Angrist, good. Yeah, Angrist says, laying aside Saruman's knowledge, there's also the fact that there are warriors in Rohan who might be able to help stop the Nazgul, who in Bree would be able to repel the Nazgul. Bob and Nob. Yeah, exactly. So I agree. I agree that it makes sense. Again, that to me, that the number one likeliest explanation of seek my aid at once or it will be too late is, like, first of all, it suggests I have help to give, right? There is a definite concrete reason for coming. But secondly, help me hold the line at the Gap of Rohan seems to me the absolute most likely explanation for why he should hurry. Maybe there's an opportunity. Maybe they can turn them back. Because think of what would happen if they turn them back. If Gandalf's getting to Isengard in time were to make it possible to turn back the riders from the Gap of Rohan, if it were possible to prevent that, so necessitating them going around and crossing the mountains somewhere else instead, he could buy Frodo months of extra time, right? I mean, that's a big, I mean, because he's thinking about Frodo. I can't protect him on my own. Maybe I can protect him with the help of Saruman. Maybe we can buy him an extra. So I'm gonna send him a letter. Get out right now, right? Leave by the end of July. Get to Rivendell. If he leaves by the end of July and he gets to Rivendell by, like August, or September at the latest, then especially if we turn them back at the Gap of Rohan, there is no way that the Nazgul can get even into the same area, right? The same chunk of the map as Frodo. So it would be worth the risk, right? Definitely worth the risk to do that if that could be achieved. Yeah. Yeah, good. Okay. Now, Evil Dr. Cannon, I agree with you. Radagast seems to show very little curiosity. Let's the last thing we'll do here, let's think about this from Radagast's point of view. Radagast shows he does not ask Gandalf, what's it all about anyway? He has to have noticed that Gandalf is hanging out in the country that the Nazgul are looking for. So whatever is the reason, and it's got to be a good one, though he has no idea. There's obviously no coincidence here, right? So Gandalf is clearly involved in something in the Shire. There is some reason that brings Gandalf and Sauron both directing their attention to whatever this uncouth Shire place is, right? What is it? What are they looking for? Do you know what they're looking for, Gandalf? Do you know, what are you doing in the Shire? I totally hear you, Matt, that I would think that these are questions Radagast might have asked. Now, Emily says, as a fellow introvert, I understand Radagast's lack of interest completely. Plenty of reason to think that Radagast is an introvert. Sure. Kurtzimus does say that Radagast doesn't want to meddle in the affairs of wizards. It could be a kind of professional curiosity. JJ, that's what I was thinking too, that Gandalf is abridging the story and leaving out those questions. He doesn't... It seems to me very likely that the speeches that Radagast is given in this recounting by Gandalf is not necessarily the whole conversation that went down there. That seems to me by far the most likely explanation. I bet Radagast did ask, but I could easily believe that he wouldn't pry. If he said, what is it that leads them to look for the Shire and you to hang out in the Shire? Gandalf might well have said, yeah, there's a reason, but I can't disclose more about it here. I think that Radagast would have respected that. So, I'm sure to some extent that, but I don't think we have to imagine that Radagast just wasn't interested at all. Yeah, Valori, that is an interesting point, that Radagast does seem to be trying to avoid giving Gandalf anything like a command or request. He's just delivering a message, right? And even the message itself is gentle. If you feel the need, he will help. But in order to get this help, which he's freely offering, if you want it, you have to come right away or the help won't be available. And he can't specify what it is because, again, this seems like a normal thing. Right, a fairly normal thing for all the people involved. Right, that is, it's professional courtesy among wizards not to meddle in each other's affairs. Right, Radagast doesn't seem to have asked Saruman what help he could give or why it is Gandalf has to come down right away. Right, yeah. Well, see. Evil Dr. Cannon, that's exactly the point. We don't know what the job of wizards is exactly. We don't know. We know Saruman's job. Saruman's job is researching ring lore, right? He is providing very relevant scholarly expertise to the Council of the Wise, right? And it makes sense for him to be the head of the order because the one who knows most about the enemy should, but like the fact that he is the head of the council does suggest that, well, the Council of the Wise are set against Sauron. Radagast isn't on the Council of the Wise, as far as we can see. There's no evidence that he is. Yeah, there's no evidence that he is. Yeah, so, exactly. Well, we'll get to that, Flammifer, the question of how Radagast heard all this from Saruman. We'll get there. We'll get there. So, all we can see is there seems to be some kind of professional courtesy here, right? Saruman did not explain what the help was that he was offering. And Radagast didn't, he did not make his conveying this errand contingent upon knowing that. He doesn't make his delivery of the message to Gandalf contingent upon Gandalf's explaining what he was up to and what's going on, right? That's, yeah. So there does seem to be, like, what do you call it? Professional courtesy or uninquisitiveness, if that's just kind of a pattern there. But it certainly seems to be. Radagast doesn't absolutely need to know. Now, I do still agree with Mike that there's plenty of reason to think that there was more conversation here. But nevertheless, even if there were more conversation, I can't imagine Gandalf told him the truth about the Ring of Power. I think he would have kept it. I think he would have hidden that. And therefore, that it's very likely that Radagast would have respected that and gone away not knowing. Mike says, could I imagine Gandalf being so uninterested if the positions were reversed? No. But two things. One, that doesn't necessarily mean that I see if the positions were reversed. Do you think that Gandalf would put the fear of fire on Radagast if he did? I mean, would he strap Radagast down and threaten him with fire if he didn't tell him? No. I think if the positions were reversed, do I think Gandalf would be curious? Yes. Do I think he'd be speculating? Yes. Do I think if Radagast told him, no, I can't reveal, it would be unwise to reveal that just now, Gandalf would wheedle, beg, and threaten until he did? No, I don't think he would. I think he would respect that. I think he would speculate. I think he might pursue it in other ways, maybe. But that's one thing, is that I don't think, just because I do think Gandalf would be interested, does not mean I think that Gandalf would not respect Radagast's boundaries in the same way that Radagast is obviously respecting the boundaries of both Gandalf and of Saruman. The other thing that I think about this is that we don't know what Radagast's job is. What's Radagast's job? Is he... as Emily says, Gandalf has made a career out of meddling. Yes, he has. Going about the country at a great rate and minding everybody's business, whether it belongs to him or not, right? That's like on Gandalf's business cards, right? Radagast, first of all, doesn't go around the country at a great rate, certainly, right? That's not his job. What is his job? He stays at Rhosgobel. What does he do? What is his purpose? What is his point? We have no idea. We have not yet been given the first piece of evidence. The fact that he was never a traveler is literally the only thing that we're told that gives us any vague hint about Radagast's life and career. We don't know what Radagast's purpose in life is, his job as a wizard. Gandalf and Saruman are both they're both resisting Sauron. Saruman through his ring lore, right? Becoming an expert. He is an expert on the academic subject of the evil of Sauron and resisting it, right? That's what he studies. And so as the expert on that subject, he was made the head of the White Council. Gandalf is a professional meddler. He goes about and he tries to, he messes with things, right? Like Erebor. What business of that, of his was that, right? Why does he go about bringing hobbits on adventures? Why does he go about, helping lost dwarf kings to return to their mountains and dispose of dragons? Why does he arrange adventures like this? We don't know, but this seems to be his remit, right? This is what he does. Is Radagast supposed to do that? We have no reason to think it. We have no reason to think that he does have that same remit, have that same job. So we've not even been told about the birds and beasts yet. We don't even know that about Radagast yet. All we know is that he lived, or at least used to live, on the borders of Mirkwood and was never a traveler, right? So minding other people's business and being involved. So again, like Radagast, him leaving this to the experts, leaving this to the, and notice it makes sense if you think about it this way. Gandalf and Saruman are on the White Council. Radagast isn't. There's no reason to think that Radagast is on the Council of the Wise. But so it would make sense if Gandalf and Saruman both are directly involved in opposing Sauron. This is relevant to them. Maybe it's not relevant to, other than indirectly, right? I mean, presumably it's going to be a drag for everybody, right? If once Sauron, conquers the world. So Radagast is probably, in general terms, anti-Sauron conquering the world. But that doesn't mean it's his area of study, right? Of focus. The question of... Kurtzimus, could he monitor Dol Guldur? Sure, but what reason do we have to think that he does? Again, like, why should he have a job of that kind, even? And I think if there's any evidence... Yeah, no, sure. I mean, he's near Dol Guldur, but what difference does that make? Again, why should he be monitoring it? Why should he have that kind of a job? Like, why should we... I mean, I agree if you start off with the assumption... He is a wizard and one of the good guys. He is one of the, resources of the free people against Sauron. What would he be doing in Mirkwood? Then yeah, sure, monitoring Dol Guldur makes a lot of sense. But why should we assume that? Why should we assume that that's a wizard's job? Maybe wizards are just academics. Maybe he's been spending lots of time, studying... the variations in nutrient enrichment of the soil of Mirkwood, as part of a longitudinal study of, plant life cycles. I mean, he could be doing that. There could be an interesting, it's quite possible he could be doing those things. Something like that, right? Not something that has to do with Sauron at all. We don't know enough to know. We have no idea how many wizards there are. No idea. I mean, I know there are 5, but that's not come up yet. Pop quiz. How many times is that mentioned? The number of wizards in the Lord of the Rings? How many times is that mentioned? Once. Only in Gandalf's, or in Saruman's speech to Gandalf at Isengard. When he mentions the rods of the 5 wizards is the only time that comes up. So at this point, we have no reason to think that we're talking about 3 of the 5. We're talking about, that this scene is involving 60% of the wizards of Middle-earth. There could be dozens. And in The Hobbit, it sounds like there are dozens, even hundreds, right? So yeah, there could be all of these sort of eccentric specialists. Well, Mike, I agree. You think there would be a purpose if you sent wizards across the sea, but who says that wizards came across the sea? Who said that? Nobody said that. Again, it's gonna be said, but it hasn't been said yet, right? Not even... It won't be said at all in The Lord of the Rings until Treebeard wonders whether or not the wizards came, and Treebeard, is speculating that they might have come from Numenor, that the wizards might be Numenorian holdovers, right? You see what I mean? So we don't know. We don't know. And I'm not even sure, when Tolkien wrote this scene, I'm not sure Tolkien knows that the wizards came from across the sea. But anyway, so we have no idea. We have no idea, but Radagast seems to be... Right, we have no idea. Fourth Dauntless, the thing about Gandalf's name in the West, when his name in the West is that's from Faramir indirectly. So that is going to be told to us as an indirect quotation from a character who hasn't been invented yet at the time that this scene is written. So we're still, it's interesting to see. It's interesting to see how this idea is developing in Tolkien's mind. But Radagast's job, no idea what Radagast's job is. So is he uninquisitive? Sure. But again, it isn't his job, right? I think he deserves to be praised and thanked for taking time off of whatever it is he does to run this message for his superior, right? Saruman clearly called in a favor. Well, gave an order. I agree that it does sound like this definitely comes from a superior, right? Radagast is being, he's being diligent to the chain of command. He knows it's a big deal, right? He's creeped out about the Nazgul, such that he's even looking around at the hedges, right? He's creeped out about the Nazgul, so he clearly, he's driven by great need. Not his own need, maybe, right? But he understands. He knows enough to know that the Nazgul crossing the river secretly and moving westward is news, big news, evil news, big evil news, right? He knows that. And so he's like, yeah, okay, sure. And Gandalf needs to know this? Okay, great. And you can help him? All right, fine. I'll bring the message. And then he brings the message, and then he leaves again, right? As we'll see next time. Good. Yes, Brandon, good summary. So Brandon says, Mike says it sounds like a researcher dragged into taking time away from research to teach an undergraduate course. Yeah, kind of. His department chair came in and said, you got to do this. Okay, right. So Brandon summarizes. We know, 1, there are wizards. Yes, plural. Some of them are on a council. Yes. Saruman is the head of the council. Yes. No, we do know Saruman's area of expertise. And the reason I'm talking about Radagast being involved in research, or, one possibility that the wizard's focus is sort of academic in some sense, we have reasons to think this. Both Saruman and Gandalf speak, both of them have academic specialties, right? Saruman specializes in the lore of the rings. Gandalf has already joked about being the only one among the wise to go in for hobbit lore, an obscure branch of knowledge, but full of surprises, he says. Just like many academics I have known who have a particularly obscure field of study, and might laugh at themselves when admitting that very few other people go in for their particular, highly obscure, very focused, and to most other people, strange and puzzling areas of academic interest, right? And yes, Bricktails, we've seen Gandalf do archival research. And we've seen that when he did archival research, the only other person who had done archival research was one of the other wizards, right? So there is good reason to think that that the wizards are, in some sense, academics, that they are lore masters, that they study and learn things, right? What is Radagast's field of study? We don't know, right? But it doesn't have to be, Sauron. And certainly there is no reason necessarily to assume that Radagast's job, as it were, would be to fight against Sauron in any way. Again, he could just be on a nice little quiet research grant in the forest down there. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so Gandalf would be the weird one, going around meddling in things, right? Participating in stuff, interacting with people all over the place. Not best practice necessarily, right? I mean, is Gandalf like an anthropologist who goes out and instead of just studying these other cultures, goes in and tries to like fix them, help them, right? Change their cultures? Some people would call that meddling. Anyway, okay. But now I've gone way too long. See, I spent way too long on this slide, but that's okay. This is Radagast's moment in the sun. We don't want to take it away from him because he will never get another one. All right. Mudmore says, that ring belongs in a museum. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, good. Okay. All right. I am going to let you guys go. We are super late. I'm supposed to be like ending the field trip now. I feel guilty. So let's get to that. So we're going to the field trip now. Thanks everybody for joining us. See you guys next week for more Radagast. We'll do 2 weeks of Radagast. It's so exciting. Awesome. Thanks everybody. Feel free to join us over on twitch.tv/SignumU for our field trip. Good night to the people on Twitter and to those of you who can't stick around, and I'll see you guys next week.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Valori.
Double the Radagast, double the fun.
Yeah. Man, so my settings got all messed with again.
Oh no.
Like it seems to have just like reset my settings for some reason. Oh, and now it's being weird. Hang on.
See, I'm going to start following up people while we're here.
Yeah.
Renzelis, I'm pretty sure you can't do the instance at level 22 though. So
Yeah, it's a non-scaling instance, right?
Yeah, it's non-scaling, but I also think there's a couple of requirements before getting to these instances.
Okay. Okay. All right. So we can just head from there. We're going to try to look around Urugarth a little more tonight.
Yep. There we go.
Nice. It's like going to Urugarth from the comfort of our own home.
Is the fortress of Urugarth.
It's like remote questing.
Countless orcs, goblins, and other curs of.
Can you see me? I don't see you. Is your mic on? I can't hear. Fine.
Yes.
I heard somebody mention it's kind of like a seance.
Right. Well, it's like you can go questing in Urugarth, but you don't have to put on nice pants.
If you were here, give me some sort of sign.
Here, let me see. Hang on a second. People are saying your sound is low. Let me turn you up a little bit here.
Oh, okay. Yep.
It's probably...
I'm up full blast.
Yeah, probably my fault here.
Also, my voice is still a little fuzzy.
There we go. Is that better? Better, Nancy? That's
I believe so.
Okay. All right. So let's see. We went. There wasn't much over the left-hand bridge, right?
Yeah, that one was a dead end.
Right. Boy, look at these goblins are begging for mercy, but no.
Leave me be.
Okay, now I wanted to get down there and see the stonework on those buildings.
Oh, yes. This is where we found those artful drums.
Yes, the drums. Nicest drum heads ever. Oh, hang on, I forgot to get a pet to help with this problem. My pest control eagle. Okay, right, we got up here. And past here a little bit.
Hang on, I'm gonna kill some creeps.
Oh, seriously, that was just rude.
One of them yelled, "What fun!"
What fun throwing fire around?
Yeah, probably. We have explosives! Kaboom!
Well, I gotta be careful. I forget what a wimp Narnian is. I mean, he might be 45
yeah, elves
levels
are
over.
so flammable. Why are elves so flammable?
Right. Well, it's not, it's just that, you know, he was he's never completed a quest in his life, so
Oh, yeah.
he's got no gear. I think he's still wearing the gear you get in the intro area.
Oh my.
Yeah. Yeah, I've not even bothered to put on the armor that came with the
Yeah.
Valar that I got. I forget what it is. Gift of the Valar, Song of the Valar. There's so
what
many
was
of
that?
them.
No worries, I got you, fam.
Okay.
Alright, cool.
All right. Okay. So, all right, this is where we were, right, with the crude bass drum. Right. Okay. And then
Yep,
we were
yep.
looking for ways down because we can
Really
see
interesting
some of the
metalwork here.
right, and we can see some of the old stone here, but some of what looks like some of the new metalwork, right, like
Yes.
this.
Quite a lot of it too, and different things for the like backing up these columns and stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So let's head. Should we head this way? It's the best way to
That's
get
where all the
down.
monsters are, so there's probably more to see.
Right. Exactly. Oh, look, there's another one of those not quite Cairo things. The 8.
Yeah.
Like the wheel, like the wagon wheel motif.
You should just call them dwarf wheels at this point or something.
Right. Right. Though it isn't exactly the same as the.
No, it's not quite Durin's wheel, is it?
Right. Yeah. It's not quite the same as that wheel, but it's like it. And where we've seen it has been places where it's been sort of attached to the old architecture, like this one is here. You've got the old black and white stonework there.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's
again,
different stone though.
and again here, this is all old stuff, not like what we saw from the distance there.
Yeah, I'm noticing the bridges are different than the black and white building. The bridges.
Yes. Yeah, the bridges look newer. The bridges look newer.
So the bridges and the dwarf wheel and these weird knifey buttresses are the same age.
Yes.
Because I see identical stuff.
Okay, but now this is.
Whoa! Yep, that's the dragon. Okay.
Oh, look, there's a dragon.
Yeah, big old thing.
This is the dragon that was flying around?
Yep.
Okay.
He's just stopping by to say hello.
Well, this looks like his nest. There's bunches of eggs.
Oh, yeah. I
Um,
guess we're not going to see much architecture here.
well, there's this, which is newer stone. So we're out of the range of the older stone now. So this bridge is new.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that stuff over there, like most of the fundamental architecture, there might be some newer stuff that was added onto it, especially the bridges.
Uh-huh.
But most of the newer stuff over there, the core of that area was old Angmar. Then you've got the bridge, which looks newer, like most of the bridges are, and then you've got this newer stuff over here.
Yeah. Look how shiny the metal is.
Yeah. And that tower too, over there. So this was built during the hiatus or towards the end of the hiatus.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be old enough, though, because, we see it being mostly or at least partly ruinous. Well, sort of chipped off. I mean, it's not... Well, no, I guess in some places it's pretty well run down.
Yeah. I suppose any wear and tear would be due to dragon interference.
Well, there is
Drake.
always that. I mean, there
Drakes.
is...
These are drakes. These are not proper dragons. We've seen proper dragons.
Right.
Oh.
Oh, I think just like that. It's really rude. I'm
Yep.
trying to look at the towers.
You do that.
Okay. Yeah, it's not clear why these towers are here. Like, why anybody built these towers over here. What is, what is Asht Chapel? Can we get in there?
I don't know. Let's see.
Let's see, is this a tomb?
Yeah. Ooh. Mood letting.
It's not a tomb, it's a cave. It's just a cave with a door. Okay, so this looks like just like a sort of bolt hole that orcs have made. Everything in here is very temporary.
Dang it, I keep targeting this bird.
Yeah. Wolf totems. Bad drum heads. The cool banner.
Nice hand banners. Yeah.
The cool banner. Sheets of leather. Yeah, this just looks like a squatting place, really. There's no evidence of... It's just a network of caves.
Yep. It's actually less developed than Goblin Town.
Yeah, it is. There's no real reason to think that any of these guys have been here for more than... I mean, the most permanent
Judging
structure
by the bones.
Right. Well, but those can be imported, you know.
I ain't leaving without my skull pile.
Oh, and that's a cliff.
Oh, yes, quite. Is it a cliff we go down, or... Did someone run ahead, or...
I think somebody did run ahead and go down the cliff.
Okay. Should we go ahead?
How will we get out? Yeah, but Bolong Spawn didn't see it coming, yeah. Yeah.
That is an instance. We just leave the instance.
I didn't see a turn. Is there a turn off?
I don't know. Could be.
Well, I wanted to go down anyway, so let's go ahead and go down.
Yep. When does anything ever stop you from falling off at things if you wanted to?
Exactly. We might as well jump. Because down is a direction in which we wanted to go anyhow. To the lower
Might
city.
as well jump.
So maybe this will come out. See, look, there's another door. Maybe this door will lead out to the lower city, which is where we want to go.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, this does not show any signs, any evidence of being involved in... Hey, okay.
Any part of Angmar. Just
That
natural
worked.
caves.
Yeah, we're down in the lower city now, right?
Yeah, are we out of the instance? No, it still says we're in Urugarth.
Yeah, we're still in Urugarth. Okay. Bridge. New style bridge, just like before, headed to old style walls.
This one's got different... Yeah. This one's got the spikes on the bridge. It's a little different.
Yeah, the style was a little bit different. Huh. Yeah, I think those high bridges that we're seeing up there are more like where we were. Oh, hang on. Where's the dread coming from? Oh, it's from that dude?
Just like...
Who is he? I didn't see
Champion
him.
of Urugarth?
A champion of Urugarth?
No, I just got champion of Urugarth.
Oh, you
just killed Mothrang.
Look,
Mothrang?
white factories. Oh, a white factory.
What does the carrot over the A sound like?
Oh. It should just mean, you know, a sort of a longer vowel.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
You got a phylactery factory.
Now, if we're down in the lower city that we were seeing from before, which I think we are based on these bridges I'm seeing way up there, back behind us. But I think those are some of the ones that we were passing over before, so I think this is the lower city we were seeing.
Oh,
From above, it looked like it was all new construction down here, all new stone. But,
oh man, look at the moon up there. Where I'm standing, you can see it between the two towers over here. That is a bloody moon.
What direction is it? Are you pointed?
See where I'm standing?
Yeah.
That is a poignant looking astronomical
That
body.
is a pretty cool moon. Anyway, down here among it, we see that the walls are old.
Yeah.
The walls are old. The white factory is new.
Yeah.
A lot of things like those bridges and this ramp are new. Some of the other towers are newer.
White factory is new, but the sort of altar space it's on is not. I don't think we've ever been this much inside the old buildings before.
Right.
Usually we're just on the outside looking in. This one, it looks like we're actually inside one of the upper stories of the building. Oh my.
Is this a city?
That is a cage fight.
My.
Boss fight.
Boss fight.
There are
Someone
iron-beaked
activated it.
minions.
Yep.
Hey, look, I'll contribute. Hey, look, I'm really a lore master. I set things on fire.
Good fire. Nice fire.
You can tell I'm
Friendly
legit.
fire.
This iron-beaked minion is apparently minding his own business over here, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah. He ain't got no beef with nobody.
Right, exactly. So, that's fine.
Just a bird. Leave him alone.
Okay, so. Yeah, see, I still want to say that the core of this is still old, right?
Yeah.
We've got the main, some of this stuff in the courtyard here is probably new, but most of it's old.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if this means when we get into, I wonder how much of the fact that Carn itself looked like it was all new stone when we were seeing it from across from the scenic overlook. I wonder if that will turn out to have been an optical illusion of some kind.
Good.
Well, this is a weird courtyard with all the gates. How does anyone get out of here at all? Doesn't seem a very useful court if you can't go anywhere.
Well, I think it just requires, a key or whatever. Just like everything else around here. Look how tall some of these things are. Like we're looking at buildings that, like, just height-wise are close to, like, New York City skyscrapers.
The moon looks even more amazing from here.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Oh, it's so creepy. I love it.
That is extremely ominous. Okay. Let's see.
And these little skeletons have, like, little lights inside their cage, so it looks all dramatic.
Notice also that the frames hanging the cages are the new fishhook metal.
Oh yeah.
They're not just hanging on posts or the underside of bridges or something.
Wow. Considering how poorly used we've seen some of the attempts to recreate fishhook metal, you wonder that they wanted to use it for something as petty as sort of decoration.
Right. the
It's
whole
like use it on
hanging
that arch
cage
that's
decorative
rusting
motif.
and falling apart.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's not just the wall. It goes all the way up this whole way,
Wow.
the old architecture. This archway is new.
Yep.
The archway is new, but the walls on either side are old. And I wonder, it might not even be new. Notice it's got the wheels around
Yep.
there. We have seen them use the old gray stone in some places. Maybe the old gray stone isn't always old. Isn't always new, rather. Sometimes it did seem like in the courtyard right outside Urugarth to supplement the old walls, or when it was used for a different kind of construction like this. There's some
Maybe it's just
places,
from the same quarry.
right? There are some places where we're seeing what I definitely think is newer construction, especially in the things that look like faux versions of the old black and white walls,
Yeah.
with the rusty metal, right?
Yeah.
That's where it seems to me most conspicuous. But I think almost all of this is old. I think the bridges have been redone
Yeah.
because they probably collapsed.
If they got to get guys like this across them, they probably need reinforcing every couple hundred years.
Right, exactly. Easy to see how that would not go well. Oh, right, I forgot there's no useful map, so I can't tell how much more there is to discover. But yeah, I'm pretty convinced that Urugarth itself is, at the least, primarily from Old Angmar, which means I'm fully expecting to see. I'm now expecting that what we saw from afar, that what we saw
Sweet
from
release? Oh my goodness.
yeah, that what we saw from afar was like an illusion, in some sense. Where is my?
Oh, it's a pale folk. That's why he's saying sweet release. Oh, let's start.
He's saying sweet release.
Sweet release from when he's dying.
Oh, sweet release from like the torture of life. Yeah,
Yeah, I suppose. Probably not much fun being them, is it?
right. I'm trying to set my my pet on attack everybody all the time mode, and it
Oh, it's got a green waterfall.
doesn't seem to be working. Oh well.
This.
Whoa!
Oh, have we seen a cauldron that looks like this before? That looks kind of new.
Huh.
That's a fun little trivet.
I don't remember. I mean, you'd think we would have seen a cauldron like this, but I don't think
Yes.
we have.
No.
Especially with that nice 4-square frame with the. It's almost like it's got, rounded corners to childproof it, except then they put all the spikes, so that kind of undoes the childproof.
They almost look like pauldrons, except
Yeah.
they're rather obviously made of wood, I think.
Yeah, they are. They are. Nancy, I was just thinking the same thing. Nancy says, "Don't talk to me about life." I was thinking about Marvin as well.
It's like the scenic overlook.
Yeah, I'm seeing what we can see down there. There's a path and another tower. But yeah, even over there, no, it's all old stuff. That is fascinating. So now I'm expecting that when we and this is, oh no, there is a continued path down this way, right? I'm now expecting that when we get into Carn Doom proper, we're gonna find that it actually is all old, which really makes more sense. Oh, this is just the kennels?
Oh, what's that mask over the fort?
That's a wolf mask. We have seen that before.
We're happy?
Yeah, like a big 3D version of the wolf totems.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely have seen that. That's the warg sign.
Oh yeah, it's the dog kennels.
Yeah. Interesting, there are a bunch of places that they're just kind of repurposing, like those caves and this area that's really nothing like in Old Angmar. I mean, maybe
They
it
had
was
that
used
whole
in
palace where the Raven guy was, but it's like
right.
either they're not using it or we can't get to it.
Or they're using it for other things. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how like the orcs were in that cave network, in these very temporary structures in the cave network. And now these wargs are being held in this just little area with palisades, and these little stone stable things are the most permanent structures we've seen there. You guys are doing a great job of drawing aggro, because those two wargs just wandered right past me. Didn't pay the least attention to me. Oh, that's a pool. I thought that was just a really deep hole for a second. Okay.
I think it's where the puppies drink.
Yeah. No, I think I feel like I've gotten an answer to my question. Hey guys, sorry. I don't know what's up with you, but yeah, you're good.
Well, it says we got all 4 bosses for here, so.
And did we? Yeah, see, you can see down on this level too.
Oh yeah, it's all old stuff.
All old stuff, except that one tower on the corner there, which I wonder. I think that might be, perhaps that is in fact old too, because the metal doesn't look like the brown rusty metal.
Yeah.
So even though it's the different kind of stone, I bet you that would have the wagon wheels on it if we went to look.
It does make me wonder if like there was an old palace and a new palace though.
I wonder. Well, we'll see. We'll see when we compare with Carn Dûm. Well, I shouldn't keep people too late because I started super late.
Yeah, I think we've seen everything in Urugarth.
I think we have. I think we're certainly close enough to be able to.
If we're wrong, but leave us a note. So
right.
We'll make sure to check it out.
I do like the drakes flying randomly overhead. That's kind of fun. Okay. All right. Awesome. So we will return up to Carn Dûm next time. We'll I guess start from Tarman Sosa again and go across and then take a right at Urugarth instead of going in, and then just sort of continue our explorations to see how that unfolds. But I'm now expecting we're going to see more old stone architecture than it looked like from across the way.
Sounds good.
That's what I think. All right. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. Thanks, everybody who is so industriously killing things so I didn't have to fight anything and could just look around. Do the really important thing, which is examining the architecture and trying to decide what's going on here. But awesome. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye now.
Bye.
Thanks for joining me on this epic exploration of The Lord of the Rings and of Standing Stone's video adaptation of Tolkien's story. If you are having even half the fun I'm having on this journey, I hope you will consider supporting the project by donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.